Jade, thanks for your time. It's a big topic, football in Australia. Unfortunately, till this point, the participation of Indigenous communities in that big story generally hasn't itself been such a big story.
Yeah, no, thanks, Harps, for having me. It's good to see you and be back talking football. Yeah, for me, it's always been a talking topic for me for the last 25 years being, a footballer, and especially, 20 years professionally. Growing up in Taree, the mid North Coast. A lot of kids from my community, they, chose the rugby league, and I, from my background, just to give you a little bit of background, I come from a sort of underprivileged sort of background. With my parents separated when they were young. My mum had me at 19, and my mum didn't want me growing up in that sort of vicious cycle where there's no opportunity. And sort of, it took me from there to sort of move up to the Gold Coast where all the kids played soccer, and growing up, and that's why I fell in love with the game, and then went on to represent, the young representative teams, and then going to the more national teams. And from the national teams, that I was always looking around, wondering why there weren't other Indigenous players that were playing the game. And there's so many different factors. And I guess as football, we're so far behind the other codes. It's been sad, because even when I was 16, 17, I was always trying to push and always trying to talk and ask questions. Why Australia? Why we're not doing enough in that space? And I don't know if it was just the resources, or it wasn't. It was just more of a, people used to talk about it but not really act on it. But I feel as we've gone through time that we're taking more notice of it now. And it was probably through my playing careers when I was sort of at the peak, where I noticed that there was a big change. And even the last, James Johnson, who's doing a great job at the moment, he's really passionate about the Indigenous side of things. But people before that, I remember ringing and calling and asking, why aren't we doing anything for Indigenous football? And from my feedback, it was always in the too hard basket, and that made me really frustrated. And I've heard this from good people, actually. And I feel now is the time is right, and everyone's taking notice of it.
Do you feel like, to go back to your Indigenous roots in Taree, because I live up that way too, as you know, and there are people in your family popping up playing soccer all over the coast, particularly on the female side of your family. Have they done that because of you, or is that the game's natural intrusion into the community?
And there's people popping up playing for the Roosters on my from my family as well. So I'm related to Latrell Mitchell. So my nan's a Mitchell and he's a Mitchell. So my grandmother and his grandfather are brother and sister. So and
so how come you didn't get Latrell to play soccer, mate?
I'm sure he would have been a good centre half or a good forward or something like that. But he's got the height and the physique for it. But so I guess it goes back to what I said before. It just, I think in Australia we're so far behind. If you look at the other codes, even cricket, AFL, rugby league, when you turn it on the Channel 9 or the free to air, everyone seems to know who all the players are. And I still think we're a little bit away from that. And if you just have to look at rugby league, your Greg Inglis, Jonathan Thurston's, your Latrell Mitchell's of the world, all the young kids know who they are. And I guess I really feel that we're making the effort. I know James Johnson, and at the moment, I've been invited down to speak on an Indigenous perspective with Ken White tomorrow, actually. And although Kaya Simon, she's overseas, and because of the time difference, it's hard for her to be involved. But I really feel that the other codes, and when it comes to government funding and things like that, they don't take it as serious as the other codes.
You just mentioned Kaya Simon, which reminded me very quickly. You both got links to the Biripi tribe. You most certainly, because it's tattooed across your arm, which first caught my attention a while ago. Does that mean the Biripi nation is the best soccer nation in Australia, having spawned you and Kaya?
If I said that, there'd be a bit of uproar for the other communities. But look, I'm heavily involved in a lot of the tournaments that happen up here in Queensland, down in New South Wales, down in Narra. And there's kids like we don't even reach that around WA, South Australia, the NT. So, like I think Indigenous they're so suited for soccer. It's not funny. I think it's can run all day, got the hand-eye coordination with the feet. You just got Indigenous kids. You chuck them a tennis ball or a cricket ball or whatever, and they'll just love playing. Doesn't matter as long as it's something out and about. And just it's a way. I guess it's a way of expressing yourself. And I feel like football is the best game to express yourself.
You've been in rarefied territory yourself. Fantastic career. And at the time, when you captained the Newcastle Jets to win the A-League, Champions of Australia, at the time, according to my recollection, you were the first Indigenous man to captain a team to a national championship. Of course, that attracted all sorts of criticism, because what about Artie Beetson, et cetera, et cetera? And I meant no disrespect to Artie, but they weren't the National Rugby League back then. There wasn't the AFL, and the Indigenous leaders of those teams probably came after you. Were you realise that you broke that turf on behalf of yourself and your family and your people?
Well, I don't know if it's the A-League and the old NSL. I think Frank was from his background. His grandmother's Indigenous as well. So
definitely,
yeah. So
did he captain that team though? He coached it. Certainly, it's a huge credit.
Well, I think with the Strikers, I think he won the trophy as a captain coach. I think I don't know if he was captain, but yeah.
Anyway, well, we're splitting hairs. Look, Frank's a legend. And
well, look, one of probably just me and Frank, I'd say. So at the time, so yeah.
So Jada, you've talked about you wanted to be an actor because your middle name's Bronson, and I'm not sure of what came first, but you've obviously been building a career to be a leader in the community. And you're forging a very impressive corporate career now, for which I congratulate you. I've got to ask you, when did you was there a point when you became seriously identified yourself as a Biripi man, as an Indigenous man? Was it something that you can always remember being? Because a lot of Indigenous athletes, they have their own story, and many say they came to this identification and getting right into the culture and digging right into their family history at different points in their life. Was that the case for you, or is it always been your...
No, very much so, Harps. And I guess I was because I'd separated from my family at a young age, and I didn't get to meet my father and the rest of the side of my family. So, and my 64 first cousins on my dad's side. So, I always knew they were there, and I knew I was Indigenous, but but at the same time, when I was growing up, I heard, at school or even when I was playing football, the racial sort of, I could just get away with enough knowing that I was Indigenous, but I wasn't out proud and speaking about it because of that, and deep down inside, I used to hate all that sort of stuff, and I used to carry that. And it probably wasn't until I was 19 when I won a championship with Olympic Sharks back in the day in the old NSL. I won my first, Indigenous award. It was called the Deadly Vibe Awards, and you got a ring, and I was one of the up and coming Indigenous, and you had these other. Mundine was winning, athlete of the year. Joshua Ross was another athlete of the year, sports person of the year. Shakaya with the Indigenous first pop sort of group that were coming out, but they were winning awards, and here I was, a young 19-year-old with the dreadlocks, and so that made me be proud of who I was and what I represented. From that moment on, that's. I'm so proud of who I am and what I don't want. That's what I do, whenever I'm talking to kids or whoever it may be. That's the message that I want to hone down on, because you should be proud of who you are, not embarrassed of who you are.
And as part of your collection of corporate interests at the moment, you've got this Kicking with the Cuz program, which is your way of, I guess, getting football into the communities and the communities into football. But if you were to, and when you sit with the authorities, James Johnson or David Eland at Northern New South Wales, etc., what's your advice to them? What needs to be done to get football in the communities more and more? Are the communities indeed ready for those approaches from the game, do you think? How should this be done?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, as you know, geographically we're so spread, and and typically it's hard because I think so many kids fall through the cracks. I probably should say it is expensive, and a lot of kids go to the other codes. And I think that's something that we have identified, and it's something as a national, body, I guess, we're working towards that. And typically, I remember I had to take out loans. My mum, she had to put 2-3 jobs she had to work just to put food on the table sometimes, you know. So, and to go to those camps, that would be like $200-300 back in the day, and we couldn't afford that. So, and some of the fees that are happening today in Australia, they are quite high. And but there is a way, and you know, I'm certainly trying to be a big part of that, and not just an Indigenous but underprivileged kids that want to, you know, they shouldn't be the kid that looking outside the stadium, looking through the gates, wanting to play. They should be there participating on the grass, you know. So, and I guess as a football body, I think we're all trying to find the best way possible. And to answer your question, I think, you know, we have to put, you know, get some sort of funding from the government that then enables, you know, state by state to be able to, you know, for New South Wales or Queensland or in those different regions, is have sort of like a Indigenous liaison officer that connects with certain clubs and has some sort of an identification process, or helps pay for young kids, you know, if they're talented, pays for their fees, or do you know what I mean? So, and I guess the A-League's getting better at it each year when they go to the remote, the country areas, and you put on great spectacles, and you know, as well as you know, Harps, that, you know, Taree, they've got some great footballers, you know, Northern Coffs Harbour, you know, Gary Phillips, he's from up that region, you know, and you know, then you come up to my way, southeast Queensland, over the border, you know, you've got the northern New South Wales. So there. And when I play in these Indigenous tournaments down in Yarra and up in Queensland, you just see how much passion some of the guys that I play with next to me. But they've come through the ranks. They've come through, you know, they've persisted, and just they love the game. They love their culture and they love the game. So I know there's a sleeping giant there. It's just like, I guess it's up to us, and how do we sort of wake that giant?
I'm going to ask you a question which you might think sounds loaded, and certainly people listening to this might think it sounds loaded, but I'll ask anyway. When you were representing the Socceroos in World Cup qualifiers, playing with distinction in China and other matches through Europe to get Australia into the big dance, was there ever a moment over dinner at the team hotel where you thought, geez, you know what, I wish I stayed playing rugby league?
No way in the world. I remember when you brought up that China, that was Pim Verbeek, the late Pim Verbeek, you know, and
Kunming, Jado, Kunming, you played an incredible game.
Yeah, and that was a game where Pim, you know, I was in there for most of the camps and a lot of the games leading up to the World Cup, and you know, and then I got the call up. I think it was against Singapore, and then that's when there's a mixture of A-League and the mixture of the European boys, and you know what it's like. They have to play the European game, and then they got to get let out after, and they can't release them because it was a midweek game. And we played Singapore, and Harry Kewell was the captain at the time. And then he felt a bit of a niggly at half time. He had to come off, and then Pim Verbeek was looking around the room, and then he sort of threw me the captain's armband, and then I led the boys out second half. So something like that, I think then I was just sort of going, you know, and then from there on, he brought me off early. And so I was looking around, so I gave it to my mate, Ante Kovic, who was my Newcastle Jets team buddy at the time. So he quickly put it on for 5 minutes towards the end. And so he'll go down in the books as captaining the Socceroos. So, but then a couple of days later, I had the opportunity, when I had the starting 11 out, there was we put a back three out, and there was Lucas sort of sweeping, myself, and I can't remember who the other one was. But yeah, I just couldn't believe that I was, major World Cup qualifier away to China. And it was just, it's just surreal sometimes.
At altitude, as I recall, Jade, Kunming, the city of Kunming's at altitude, and there was a couple of Socceroos, maybe Jason Colleen, I'm not quite sure, who'd been hit by a stomach bug or a flu. Sorry about that. I remember that game like it was yesterday, and your performance in it sort of typifies the evolution of Jade North as a Birrapine man who took the world on with the national team of Australia. It's a great yarn, mate. Congratulations. No,
thank you very much. And I've always been proud of where I've come from, but to be able to come from Taree to play with the likes of your Tim Cahills, your Lucas Neal, Mark Vidukas, and it's always going to be something special, and something that I'll always have a place in my heart.
Well, Jade, you've inspired me. A former teammate of mine, although I was an old bloke, but you've inspired me, Jade, as I've watched you and watched your career over many years, and I can only imagine the impact from here on you're going to have with the communities around Australia. Congratulations to you.
Thanks, Harps. No, thank you very much, mate. And I have to say, you inspired me as a youngster. You know, you guys, you really took me under my wing. Me and Wayne Shroy at the time were only 16, but it's times that we never forget those moments either. So thank you.
Good luck to you, Jado. Thanks, mate.
Thanks.